seconds. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Greetings. We are live from the famous Power Station studio here in Manhattan in New York City. And thank you for joining us at the Web3 panel, where we're going to talk about everything Web3 and the future of the internet. I am Alex Shebar. I'm events lead for Product Hunt, and I am so happy to have you here today. So if you have never checked out Product Hunt before, we are the best place to launch or discover a brand new product, a startup, anything along those likes. If you haven't checked out Product Hunt before, this is your moment to check it out. I guarantee you'll discover something new that you've never discovered before, something you'll definitely like. Now, before I pass us on to our panel, a few housekeeping I want to take care of. Number one, we are doing this live, totally live. Hey, here we are. But we're not doing this alone. You should check out Topia. Topia is a virtual world. We are in there today celebrating everything Web3. You can meet people just like yourself, entrepreneurs, VCs, startup makers, designers, creatives, people who are interested in the future of the internet. If you haven't checked out Topia, please do so now. You will find the link in your email or on our social media. Speaking of social media, if you do want to talk about this event, hey, we are talking about it. You can use the hashtag, nope, it's right there. There we go. Product Hunt Web3. Sorry, it was on my left and now it's below me. Wonderful. Hashtag Product Hunt Web3. We want to hear everything you think about crypto, about Bitcoin, about blockchain, anything that is on your mind. We want to hear it, especially things that our panelists are talking about. You'll meet them all in a second. All their social media will be underneath their name. Please tag them as well. Last but not least, if you have any questions, we will be doing a question and answers. Yes! So that'll happen in about 40, 45 minutes. The way you submit those is in Topia. So head to Topia, ask your questions. If there's anything pressing, things you must get off your chest, who knows, we might just read them live. That's it. Thank you so much for listening. I'm now going to pass you to our panel and our wonderful moderator, Laura Shin.
Hi there. Thanks for joining our panel all about Web3. My name is Laura Shin, and I am a journalist. I've been covering the crypto space for 6 years. I have a popular podcast called Unchained, and I'm coming out with a book about the 2017 ICO craze, which will be coming out in February, on February 22nd, and the title is The Cryptopians: Idealism, Greed, Lies, and the Making of the First Big Cryptocurrency Craze. And you can find more about it on my Twitter handle, which is @LauraShin. And joining me today for this panel are Amber Bell-Day, co-founder and CEO of Clover, Andrew Levine, CEO of Koinos Group, and Chris Perkins, president and managing partner of CoinFund. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Good to be here. Hi.
So to get our conversation started, why don't we talk about what it is about the current web that kind of like are maybe problems or things that could be improved, and that can kind of give us a good context for discussing what Web3 is and why people are working on it.
Who would like to tackle that first?
I'll go for it, because maybe I'm the oldest one here.
There you go.
When I think of Web 1, I remember going back to my college dorm, and it's kind of like how civilization has emerged. In the beginning, there were hunters and gatherers, right? And Web 1 was very inefficient, very fragmented, no scale. And then all of a sudden, civilization advanced, and I feel like Web 2, which is kind of what we're in right now, was when sovereigns came in. It's a feudalist system where we're the serfs, we're working the land, we don't own it. I think if there's only one thing that you own, maybe it's your domain name. And in return for a decent user experience, and in return for, it's feeding into this natural inclination for us to form groups and societies. And so I think Web 2 did a decent job of allowing us to form social groups. But we don't own anything, and everything that we do, our data, our private, everything goes to our feudal masters, right? Goes to that monarch. Now, as we're kind of approaching Web 3, it feels like things are changing because you're bringing together this powerful technology called the blockchain, right? And it changes everything because it's allowing us to maybe change things, maybe introduce a bit of democracy. It's allowing us to introduce private property and even governance where people have a say in what happens with their data. So I feel like Web 2 is really predicated on serving those feudal masters and we're the serfs working the land.
What are some examples of who those feudal masters are?
Well, look, I think the internet today is largely controlled by maybe 5 different individuals or centralized companies. I think you know them, the big social media companies. And I think blockchain technology allows us to shift the power from centralized control, it's really all about decentralization, right? Putting power back into content creators, putting power back into individuals who can maybe monetize their own data.
And do either of you want to elaborate on problems with Web 2?
Sure, I can add to that a little bit. I mean, I think I agree with the premise around some technical feudalism of where we've arrived. It may be differ in that what we're creating now with what we should be trying to do is to get to a system, like you mentioned, that's more decentralized. But I don't really think that necessarily is that blockchain is any sort of silver bullet for that. I think that's a piece of the puzzle for certain sorts of token incentivized systems where that makes sense. But there are, when the internet was in its golden era of being decentralized and generally hard to use, people ran their own blogs and launched their own websites and created web rings where you shared your fandoms with your friends. And things worked pretty well in a kind of small community sense. And I think a lot of that is what we have lost over the last 15 years is the sense of small community of like-minded people, because we've traded it for this sense of large town square style engagement, where we stand in the middle of something like Twitter or Facebook and we have to kind of yell into the abyss and then take on all comers. And that's maybe not what people wanted, but that's the what drives the profit engine of these kind of, as you mentioned, like centralized systems. So I hope that what we're able to work on is helping return to kind of a Renaissance era where people can participate more meaningfully in running their own piece of the internet, and that does not mean that we return to people running servers in their basements, because I think that is a bygone era. But that, what led to the rise of these SaaS business models is the tight coupling of content to infrastructure, because content creators generally can't run their own infrastructure, and that's fine. That's not a moral failing. That's totally cool. But that has been able to be exploited to become walled gardens, like Medium, like Patreon. So being able to kind of, and the area I focus on with a lot of bias these days, so this is where I focus, but removing the friction to zero of that infrastructure piece hopefully gives people more choice. And where a blockchain is useful for somebody's trying to get done, more power to you, but there's a lot of other pieces to a decentralized web than just token incentivized networks.
Yeah, I think you did a great job with the overview of the situation, and Amber raised some kind of legitimate issues and I think touched on a lot of unlearning that now needs to be done. I think the one thing I would just add to the conversation is where I kind of came into the picture. For me, I was around 2008, which I know is like a common year for all of us, and I think pretty much everybody in blockchain was really a formative moment. But looking at, this is going to sound probably off the wall, but the level of income inequality and inequality in the world that we were seeing, and seeing the secular trend of that and how things were only going to get worse. And then we have this beautiful thing, the internet over here, and open source software, which has the potential to exponentially increase the amount of wealth and distribute that wealth amongst everybody, because there's no reason to deny somebody access to incredibly valuable software. And yet what we saw was that the wealth creation that was enabled by the invention of the internet was not going to everybody. Far from it. It was going to an incredibly small number of people. And I think what we all agree on is that what I want Web3 to be, other than a kind of meaningless concept, is a push towards solving those problems and recognizing that while yes, blockchain is, I believe, at the core of the solutions, that it is not a magic bullet that will magically solve the problems, and just by putting a blockchain on something and just by launching a token, you're going to solve a really difficult problem? Absolutely not.
I appreciate your point. And Andrew, I know a lot about unlearning after spending 15 years in finance. Trust me, that's what I do every single day. But I do think that the blockchain is going to change, and it continues to change the world in which we live. Stepping back again, 7,000 years ago, the first blockchain was created, right? And that was created in Mesopotamia. And what happened in that part of the world? You saw technology explode for centuries. Art, science, everything else.
Are you talking about a ledger?
Oh, sorry, ledger. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, blockchain was
this
sorry.
is a very loose
I messed up.
definition, but
Yeah, no.
okay.
So ledger was created.
They
back,
were mining, but it was different.
Sorry. Yep. Anyway, ledger was created 7,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, and you saw this explosion, right, in technology, art, and science. You go to the Renaissance, and we saw the introduction of double entry bookkeeping, right? Again, you're messing with the ledger, which is the epicenter, the heart of finance and the economy, right? I feel like in 2008 we had this additional change to the ledger, which is the heart of the system, and I think that's going to again allow us to see within Web3 an explosion in art, technology, science. I think there's going to be political implications as well.
I completely agree that the transformative impacts to finance and the ability to move money and potentially digitally scarce items around globally across boundaries is super transformative. And what the original era internet did for the freedom and access to information, I believe we're doing for freedom and access to finance, financial services, and potentially other systems and stores and swaps of value, which is very cool. But the other problems that we're addressing or looking at is that the problem with information wants to be free as in free speech, not as in free beer, like bleeding heart visions of the early internet, which I hold close to my heart, is that the business model, there was no business model, which is okay because it was a collective public common good, and society needs shared common goods. And people like to share things even, just because we love each other. Altruistically. But when you get a company that comes in and scrapes the world's information and decides its mission statement is to organize the world's information and becomes the only arbiter of the index of said information, and drops a business model on that, and now the best minds of our generation are dedicated to making ad tech engines, now we have a problem. So it's very cool with what we're thinking about as Web3 becomes more of an, I hope, implementation neutral term for ways to address these sort of like SaaS business models. Hopefully we will see some new business models emerge that really challenge and can potentially disrupt this kind of whole fabric of what may or may not be a little bit dystopian.
Yeah, and so it's interesting actually that you bring up indexing, because I actually just came out with an article yesterday on something called the Graph, which you're probably familiar with. And it's basically a Web3 implementation of kind of like a Google, basically, where what they're doing is they're indexing the data on various blockchains, but they're doing it in a decentralized manner. So there's kind of like this network of nodes, and there's like a separate group of indexers, and none of them are hired by some kind of company called the Graph. It's just that they're incentivized by the Graph tokens to participate in this ecosystem. And I actually interviewed also this other group that is now one of their core development teams. There's multiple core development teams that are working on, helping to develop this indexing layer. And they started out as a centralized company trying to do this, and they realized, oh, we can't compete. Like they were trying to get, clients and stuff, but like the business model wasn't working. And then they kind of were like, we're going to experiment and we're going to open source a little bit. And then they did, and that kind of went a little bit better. There was more demand for what they were offering. And then eventually, once they kind of understood what the Graph was about, they were like, oh, we think we should actually participate in this and contribute. And then, of course, once that happened, now suddenly developers all over the world are pinging them and being like, oh, how can we use this? Like asking them all these questions. And like suddenly there was a lot of demand for what they were creating. And so I think, but like I said, like they're just, they hold Graph tokens, they earn them, they're investing them like in their treasury to kind of have smart treasury management, but it's not like, some kind of top-down effort by like the Graph CEO to make this all happen. It's just communities all over the world just being incentivized. So I definitely actually, obviously now we have a little bit of an argument, which I love, around what Web3 even means, but maybe we can talk about kind of like what the, I guess, ideal implementation of that would be, maybe from a more pro, or I don't know if pro blockchain is really the word, but, or blockchain-centric view. And then we can also talk a little bit more about, some of these other technologies that enable a decentralized web.
Well, not to disagree with you. But while I will be happy to explore technical implementations, I find that in my experience, that's where we tend to lose people and where we tend to like lose sight of the big picture. So again, happy to go down that rabbit hole. I just wonder. I just want to reiterate an important point that I think often gets lost. I've been in this space for a long time. People seem to forget that in almost every case, if not every single case, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about a peer-to-peer network. We're talking about some implementation of a peer-to-peer network, and a remarkably tiny percentage of the people who enter the space and invest in the space even know the term, even understand what it means, and understand the disruptive potential of peer-to-peer networks. And I think what you were referring to before is the experience that people have when they enter a peer-to-peer network, when they enter a network of people. Like, networks have existed for all time. Networks are the underlying source of all power and creativity, right? Everything gets done through networks. And really what we're doing now is building new technologies that better empower those networks to communicate better amongst themselves, to coordinate activities better, so that they can produce more output. Whatever that output is, it could be, carbon capture, like we were talking earlier. But at the end of the day, often what I find happens is people think that you don't need to remember that there's a network of people here working together towards some common mission, and then you're layering some technical implementations on top of that, and they start with the technical implementations and think that if I just get that right, then everything else will fall into place. And that's what I call I had a name for it. It's like a gray scam or something. It's like, you think you're not a scam. You think you're going to solve this problem. You have the technical implementation. You just are guaranteed to fail. I don't know if that's on topic. That's certainly not a good answer to your question, probably.
No, I like that, we all have different perspectives on this issue, because I do agree that right now there's a lot of talk about Web3, but what it really means is questionable. And it's funny because the thing about a gray scam is you can only know whether it was a gray scam after the fact. So there are a lot of people who in the moment, they're going to think that what they're doing is real, and it's just about changing reality until it fits their vision, and some people won't make it. So I think there's probably a lot of different, like when I was talking to the graph people basically for my article, one of the creators of the protocol was like, there's a lot of decentralized apps, and they're decentralized only in name, but it's basically like a centralized app that's built on Ethereum, which is decentralized. And then he was just like, that's not really decentralized. So, I'm kind of curious, how do you see a true implementation of Web3, one that really think that you really think meets this ideal we're after?
I I have some pretty specific architectural requirements, but what I would like to see is censorship-resistant protocols at a base layer, with applications that may not be censorship resistant, and sometimes it's very good not to be censorship resistant. And what I mean by that is that you want people that are consensually participating in some app to know what the rules of the road are for their own participation there, and that might mean that there is some kind of censorship, or you abide by the community rule set. But underneath that, the system itself should not necessarily be stoppable. So it's a nuanced kind of tech stack sort of a question. I don't want to go off the rails on, but
that makes sense. I think front ends exist in jurisdictions and will be subject to certain laws and regulations. But the cool thing about crypto is that it's global, instantaneously global, and you just can't stop it. When I think about Web3 and some of the challenges that we face, I think user experience right now is pretty challenging, right? How do you address decentralization across all aspects with user experience? Over Thanksgiving, trying to teach my brother-in-law how to open up a MetaMask account and access the system is not easy. I think that's a major challenge that we're going to have to navigate through as we go forward.
Well, so let's actually just talk about some of these different protocols that are saying now that they're DAOs. And by DAO, what we mean is decentralized autonomous organization, which means that it's not something that's controlled by a centralized entity with kind of an identifiable group of people that are managing it all and making the decisions, but instead it's, community vote and community proposals and stuff like that. And then basically coins are used to, vote against or for. So when you look at what's going on in that world right now, like what would you say is kind of like working and is working toward the vision that we have for Web3, and what are the hurdles that remain to, actually accomplishing that?
I think DAOs are going to be massive on an incredibly massive scale, because it feeds into a natural human instinct to form groups and to form tribes with like-minded ideals, right? But it's also feeding into that additional narrative where people like to have a say. So you kind of give them both through this. And I think Constitution DAO is an incredible example of what can happen. By the way, I think we're at before the first inning here. Look at Constitution DAO. 17,500 wallets came together to raise $41 million in a couple of days, right? Could you imagine what politicians are thinking right now about the opportunity set? But look, are DAOs great at maybe winning auctions? Maybe not. But the ability to form with an ideal so quickly, globally, incredibly powerful. And then one other thing why I think we're so early here, I was on an event with one of the top regulators, sophisticated regulators in the entire world. And I was talking about Constitution DAOs, getting all excited. And I said, what do you think about DAOs? And he said, what's that? And then he walked away. So the fact is that we are so early now because it hasn't even hit. I think if you look at DeepDAO, it's like $15 billion currently under management. I would challenge you on where that number is going to go.
Wait, I'm sorry, which DAO?
DeepDAO.io is a website that tracks, I don't know, how I can't vouch for its accuracy, but they say there's about $15 billion in assets under management. I'd be willing to bet with you where that number is going to go.
I think it's super interesting that now DAOs as a concept is having its moment, like Web3 is having its moment. I think that people tend to really underestimate the importance of concepts. For example, blockchain, right? There are many projects that are not blockchains that are arguing that they are good decentralized platforms. I think that one of the reasons why they probably won't win is because blockchain is such a powerful concept. It's so easy to understand. And it's interesting. And DAOs have been around forever. NFTs have been around forever. All of a sudden, and people are like, NFTs, it's a cool word. It's a cool, fun word. DAOs are a cool, fun word. I think all those ICOs that you are going to be talking about in your upcoming book, right? If they were launching now, they'd call themselves DAOs, even though they didn't then, because nobody would have known what it was. Now a lot of people are calling themselves DAOs. I don't necessarily think that means much as far as their implementation. I think that I've personally always preferred thinking in terms of decentralized organizations. It's simple. You have organizations, you have centralized organizations, you have decentralized organizations. I hope that the projects that are launching as DAOs now are, in fact, at least decentralized organizations. I don't know about autonomous. I don't know how we're defining that term, but apparently we're sticking with this term and committing to it. I hope they're decentralized. I suspect that a huge percentage of them are decentralizing and adopting that nomenclature in an attempt, as always, to skirt regulations. And I don't like that. I hope they're all genuinely committed to decentralization and awesome technical implementations, but after being in this space all this time, I've become incredibly cynical, and I'm more likely to suspect that they're attempting to capitalize on some marketing cachet that they get from calling themselves that. That being said, two projects that I like, Splinterlands doesn't call itself a DAO, but it's a blockchain-based game that's been around for ages and delivered millions and millions of dollars in value to their players. I've never played it. I'm not an investor. I have no stake in what they're doing. They don't call themselves a DAO. I think they're great. I don't even think that they're fully decentralized, depending on your definition, but the way they behave, the way they reward their users, and the way they use their blockchain, to me, makes them an interesting example. Then the other one that's interesting to bring up is Hive, which is a fork of Steem, which is the blockchain we worked on formerly. everybody knows there was an incident. Well, a lot of people know there's a fun incident with Justin Sun and Tron and Steem that led to the Hive hard fork. And so that's an interesting example for anyone interested to explore of how blockchains and decentralized communities and these technical implementations can interplay to create a DAO. I would say Hive is a DAO.
Yeah, I just imagine a lot of people watching probably don't know about the Justin Sun thing. So can you just talk a little bit about that and why that would lead to this other fork?
Sure, yeah. I'll just rip off that scab and revive my memory of my NDA. So Steemit was a company. Steemit.com is still, I believe, an active Reddit-style app that uses the Steem blockchain as a mechanism for rewarding content creators. And it was launched by the company that I worked at, Steemit, and Steemit acquired a large amount of the token. So there was a decentralized consensus algorithm, delegated proof of stake. You have all the content is on a blockchain, so it's immutable. But if there's an organization that has a lot of tokens, and how many tokens, how decentralized is it? So I think that's an interesting thing for viewers to kind of take away and think about, that you can have an implementation, you can have the technical aspect, but then there's this organization and how much control. And actually, it was something I wanted to say earlier was just that, like, the way I think analyze decentralized organizations is, is there somebody clearly actually in control who can really do anything, or is it truly the case that everyone is control? So, sorry, putting that aside. So what happened with the Justin Sun Tron incident is ultimately that company, that the CEO of that company sold the company and its stake to Justin Sun, who started Tron and who runs the Tron Foundation. And, so through that acquisition, acquired a large stake in a blockchain, and then leveraged his influence and his control over that stake to move that blockchain in the direction that he wanted it to go, which was his right. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm not making any judgment on him. But those actions that he took motivated the community, as far as I could tell, the entire community, like everybody of real value in the community, said, you know what? You can have this. You can have Steem. This is an open protocol. We can get the code off of the GitHub repos, and we can spin up our own version of this blockchain, and we'll move there. And that's what they did. And so that transition was actually part of an evolutionary process that led to further decentralization of that community.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack here right now, but one thing I wanted to ask about, because you were talking about how you feel like there's one entity that can control something, then basically it's not decentralized. And we've seen that there's been a number of protocols that were started by a centralized company, and then over time they've decentralized. So like I think, probably one of the earliest examples is Compound Labs and Compound, which, over time decentralized its community. And so now they would call themselves a DAO. But I'm curious, for you, would you consider, and any of you really, what do you think of things like that? And even just about this process to decentralize, or do you feel like there's a better way to do it than another? Because clearly many people are going down this path, and there's a lot of commentary on how that's being done.
To me, crypto is about community, and communities are being formed all over the place, whether or not you call them a DAO and you have DAO tooling. Almost if you look at any 10K NFT series, right, it's bringing together a community of people who rally around a certain thing, maybe a JPEG or something. But I almost feel like DAOs and communities are being formed even in the absence of calling it something. But I did want to seize on one thing you said. You said that DAOs have been around forever. In crypto, 1 month is like a year, but it's only been around for 5 years, right? DAOs, 2016 was the DAO. So we sometimes forget that this technology's only been around for 5 years, and I think that
5 years feels like 30 years. Right?
Yeah, Andrew, I was going to say in 2017, it's not that the ICOs didn't know what DAOs were; they did not want to call themselves DAOs because what happened with the original DAO. So
Right.
yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
I mean, again, I kind of agree with a little bit from column A and column B here, but you know, where we're calling something a DAO that has a financial purpose, especially to crowdfund something and then disperse funds, and that happens entirely within the virtual space, seems to make sense. You know, if you called the Constitution DAO a Constitution single-purpose vehicle escrow account, I feel like perhaps it would have been a little more accurate, but perhaps a little less sexy. So, you know, when you talk about a decentralized autonomous organization and try to replicate all of the trappings of what makes a corporation, which was one of the ambitious goals of the initial DAO, which didn't work out quite so well, you know, you realize that coordinating people that are like-minded works when everyone is already in consensus with each other. But a lot of the, you know, corporate trappings, as you guys know, is dispute resolution.
Yeah.
And there really is not a dispute resolution or intrinsic to the system way to enforce any sort of consequences that are non-financial, or perhaps a shame token that might follow a wallet which you may or may not just stop using. But the idea of like, how does your car get repossessed if you default on this loan? Or, you know, how do, you know, if we create decentralized Uber and then someone gets raped, you know, who do you call?
Yeah.
So there's decentralized coordination of groups is like a cool challenge. And again, like what we've done for information, we can do for coordination of people around the world, and that sounds neat. But I just think we need to be really careful about how aggressively we try to implement plutocracy as a solution for everything.
It's a great point. And what we're seeing as well is that the concept of a DAO has outstripped current law and regulation, right? The LLC was one of the great inventions in recent history because it allowed people to innovate and to develop things without having that personal liability. Here, if you look at how DAOs are formed, they could be perceived to be general partnerships and subjecting all the individuals to liability. Moreover, they're from people from all over the world, right? So how does that work with Australian law and Japanese law and US law, UK? So, you know, there is some danger out there, and I'm really hopeful that in time, either technology will solve for it or policy will solve for it, because there's a lot of power in what we're going to be able to do.
I think being able to do voting in a way that is audible, and I do not mean one human, one vote, because that is a difficult thing. We should not be doing elections. I just always got to remind, do not do elections on the blockchain. But if you want something where it is one share, one vote, one coin, one vote, then these systems are a great way to be able to track that kind of a voting system.
It's a great way of summing it up.
Right, but what's happening right now is like it's very easy for people to have multiple wallets and vote multiple, like from multiple wallets, and kind of make it look like there's more people that are for something or against or whatever. And so, you know, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, there's X number of wallets that participated in this vote. But what does that mean when I'm sure people are well aware, a lot of whales have like dozens of wallets, right? They don't want to keep all their money in the same 5 wallets. So yeah, I'm just curious, like, for your thoughts in this kind of time when we don't have a way of verifying data or verifying identity on blockchains. Like, what's a good way to conduct voting?
I'm not sure. It depends. Well, if you want a number of coins to equal a vote as opposed to a wallet, then it's just however the coins
right,
vote.
But then what whales dominate, and is that a good outcome?
Sybil resistance was a challenge of the initial systems, right? And that what the economic model of the kind of traditional proof of work system is meant to prevent, it's the same problem, same challenges that we're having. Yes, you can have an unlimited number of wallets and an unlimited number of identities, and that is a feature of the system, that is not a bug. The attempt to collapse that into some sort of one human represents one vote is not an easy computer science problem to solve. And so we've created abstractions to say a wallet must be a human, but we know that that's a lie. So, you know, you can whitewash over it and produce whatever metrics you want, but that's a feature of the system.
Yeah, I think you bring up an important point that people should understand. And Amber's right, this is a feature, not a bug. Creating an infinite number of wallets is meant to be possible, and making it pseudo-anonymous is the point. And so that's something we want to be stuck with. And I think part of what, if you'll allow me, I feel like you were kind of getting at before, is that blockchains are part of the solution, technology is part of the solution, but we also need to rethink the parts outside of that support our organizations. Like, how do we think about companies? How do we think about health insurance? How do we think about the real world things? Blockchain is not magic. This is actually something that we say a lot when we're talking to people who are trying to understand what we're doing. We're like, this is what we can do. Well, can you do this? No, blockchains are not magic. There are some, especially when it comes to things that are operating in the real world. And maybe it's worth considering when you get excited about blockchain and the potential, what you're really getting excited about is the opportunity to rethink the economy and how we engage and interact with one another and collaborate with one another to produce value. And building a software tool isn't the only way you can add that value. You can go in and restructure or rethink the real world organizations that you are participating in today to take advantage of this technology without adopting it, without becoming an engineer, because that's not going to happen. Like, don't try to do that. So many people learn about blockchain and they immediately think, I want to become a developer, I want to become an engineer. It's like, no, we need you too. Like, let's figure out how to work together.
Well, but I feel like neither of you really addressed the question about whales having outsized influence, which
they do. I mean, I guess that's the answer.
And so we're just okay,
but
because blockchains are supposed to be democratizing.
Are they? I didn't. I thought.
This has been the motto since the early days. But maybe you don't think that is or should be an outcome.
I do not believe that a technology is inherently democratizing. If anything, we failed at believing that it's, Wikipedia and access to better information and democratizing the world's information would lead to a more enlightened and less misinformed society, and that didn't work out that great either. But to your point about whales having more influence, I think what we're seeing in this space over and over is people reinventing like real world, not corner cuttings, but like trade-offs that happen from first principles over and over and over. And what we're reinventing now is delegated votes as well. And so this is kind of, people want to call it representative democracy. Again, I'd call it representative plutocracy. But yeah, you're abdicating up to people who want to participate in governance, and we're seeing a lot of that become investors and venture capitalists, and they have interests, and I am interested to see where it goes.
So a couple of things. I don't think, first off, oftentimes I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I think that's fine, because the community identifies problems like this, Laura, and it's the community that will solve problems like this. I think the great thing about what I'm seeing in community formation via DAOs is that it's open and it's transparent, and the rules are made through code, right? So in a way, it's more difficult to manipulate. But to your wallet question, I do think that in time there will probably be somebody who's very smart, or a community of people who are very smart who can attack that problem.
Well, and to directly answer your question, since I didn't before, I think it goes back to the issue of income inequality. And my interest was never in eliminating income inequality, making everybody exactly as poor as one another.
I don't think anybody has that goal,
right.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. My interest is how can we increase the wealth available to everybody, acknowledging that there will be income inequality, and that means, and I hate the term whales because I've heard it so many times, but it does mean that there will be whales, there will be rich people. What I care most about is the people at the bottom and making sure that they're as high as possible too. And so for me, it's not about eliminating whales, it's about ensuring everybody is wealthier.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about some of the more interesting things that have happened, especially in the DAO space, because I feel like there's kind of maybe the DAOs that are, for lack of a better term, I guess, maybe more high-minded in the sense like, oh, they manage these big DeFi protocols and it's kind of like a business, basically. So, you've got like Aave or whatever. That would be an example, Compound. But then, like, clearly there's a lot of ones that are getting a little weirder, when we're mashing up NFTs with DAOs, right? Like Constitution DAO was a great example. And actually, I had one of the people from that on my show, and he said it was $50 million So, in 1 week, that's amazing. But, there's also like Nouns DAO, and even like Bored Ape Yacht Club basically operates as a DAO or Friends with Benefits. And these are just, in a way, to my mind, they're just like cool kids clubs, like, you know what I mean? It's like you get membership to this exclusive community, you all hang out on the internet, and then you can like go to real life parties, and like you all get a token, and like you can see the value of your popularity rising through the price of the token. And so it's, clearly there's like a big range of creativity when it comes to DAOs. So I just want to hear you talk a little bit about where you think all this is going, like all this kind of decentralization and Web3 and DAOs.
Where do we think it's going? Well,
yeah, like,
those are kind of two different
like?
questions. I did take a look at I have different thoughts on all these things. I'll try to collect. Nouns DAO I hadn't heard of until you had mentioned that you were going to mention it. So I looked at that, and I have to say I thought it was kind of cool because, first of all, they say that they produce like one image every 24 hours, but they're all Creative Commons licensed, which is cool because very few people have I seen address that we have a Creative Commons and you can use existing legal structures for these things, and they exist in the public good, so good job. But they're also equally as rare as each other. I'd say equally as common, but that's different than trying to create artificial scarcity. However, their scarcity model is time-based, right? Because they're only putting out one a day. So that's cool. I feel like you're exactly to your point. You're buying membership in a thing, and then you hope that at some point you can do something with that membership, and it's neat. The other one I think you had mentioned earlier was like Pleaser DAO, and the only thing I'm going to say about that, because it's a whole crazy story of what they were able to do with buying the Wu-Tang Clan album and everything, is if we went back in time and we looked at, say, like LulzSec or I don't know, some other hacker groups, and what they would do if they got their hands on scarce information. The concept is often information wants to be free, and the thing that you do with that is not buy something and take pictures with it and accrue value. It's buy something and then do something truly disruptive, which is to give it to the people.
Well, that's what Constitution DAO wanted to do.
Well,
buy the
in a way,
Constitution and then display it on these museums and stuff like that.
So you can go around and show a Constitution, but there's only one of them. This is different in that it is something that is digitizable and could literally be spammed and released in essentially the Creative Commons, which would have been really cool. But the point isn't that they should have done that. I think what they did was an interesting project, just that what we've gotten ourselves into is thinking about capitalist solutions to every challenge that comes up, and calling it disruption because it's on top of a new technology. But let's look at what we can do to both create a society where trust is a thing, commons are a thing, and we get back to some of our hacker roots. Godspeed.
I think like I said earlier, it's innately human nature to form groups, right? And I think you're going to see a proliferation of DAOs because now with the technology, we can do it in a global manner almost instantaneously. There's new tooling coming online that makes you do it pretty simply. But what I see the future is people forming numerous groups. It's going to grow because you're feeding into that human nature. But now you also have a vote in the direction of that group based on this technology, which makes it very powerful. So I think it's just going to grow.
Actually, something Amber said I wanted to ping off of, and in thinking about Web3 and preparing for this panel, this term kept coming to me, which is that I hope that Web3 is really about post-capitalism. And we've talked about 2008 and what happened in 2008. And in my opinion, in 2008, capitalism died. From an economic analysis, you can argue that it happened. And right now we're in this limbo phase, and we don't know the direction that we're going to take. We can call that post-capitalism, and I think what Amber said, to me, I agree with Amber. That's my vision as well. And
I think you're right.
Oh, perfect. And so, but to get back to the issue of DAOs, I hope that DAOs are new organizations that are trying to build a post-capitalist future, a future that isn't communist, isn't socialist, but also isn't the pure kind of capitalist that we had in the past that didn't work. I think what we're actually seeing is maybe a positive sign that the tooling has finally gotten to a place where blockchain is actually usable, because the whole potential of it was, hey, people can build decentralized organizations with this. And those of us in this space have understood that the tooling has been very inaccessible for a very long time, and people like Amber are actually building tools to make it more accessible. We're building a whole new blockchain to make them more accessible. We've still got a long way to go, but I think that the proliferation of the DAOs says really more about the state of the tooling than probably almost anything else, because now you can spin it up. Sorry to ramble, but one of the things I always look for when I'm looking at any project, any company, is what's your mission? It's just really efficient. Like, okay, I'm talking to you, I want to understand what motivates you. What's your mission? When I look at most of the DAOs, which I admittedly put very little of my attention into, they seem to be very much lacking a mission. Buying the Constitution isn't a mission. That's one thing. That's a product, to use like old lingo, right? You're building one thing. You have one thing that you're doing. What's your mission? I feel like that's kind of what you were getting at. It's like, what motivates you? How are you trying to help make the world better? Oh, we're just gonna buy the Constitution. Like, okay.
Oh, but you can see a world where people have ideals come together within DAOs. And on the capitalism front,
that's what I'm hoping for.
You triggered my PTSD. I was at Lehman when it went down. When I look at what happened there, the crisis was caused by centralization, right? If I'm honest with myself, there's a couple of banks, AIG, Lehman, centralization. The sad thing was that the regulatory and policy response was even more centralization, right? We forced $700 trillion into central clearinghouses. One thing that gives me hope in this, I guess, I do think capitalism is going to be around, and I think actually capitalism is a feature of Web 3.0 because we're introducing private property, into the internet effectively. But long story short, rather than
capitalism doesn't own private property.
Fair enough. But I guess my point is rather than centralizing even further, I think that this technology gives us an opportunity to dispel risk, to disseminate risk, and maybe a better model going forward. And I'm hopeful that a better capitalist model, an inclusive one, can emerge where content creators like Laura, and whose book is coming out called Cryptopia, can monetize their own content.
I just to cap onto that, I think that when we say that what Web3 is, what some collection of technologies, I don't know, nobody knows at this point, but what we're talking about is a mission, is to have a better internet that empowers people and treats their data better and allows them to make better choices. And in order to make that a reality, we have to go back and address the business model lack from the open internet. And part of the solution to that is some capitalist tokenized business models that we can put onto that. So, tokens for tokens who want them and no tokens for those who don't want them. And that probably sounds libertarian, I don't know.
All right, well, I think this is a perfect place to launch into questions. Clearly, we've covered a wide range of topics, and it's been a little bit spicy, which has been fun.
We tried.
So, why don't we get our first question?
Perfect, I'm happy to. So, we have a question coming in from YouTube from Just So Antsy. Seems like a very good place to start. How do we onboard people into understanding the concept of Web3? Are there any trustworthy resources?
Well, I would start with my podcast.
Absolutely.
No, but there's plenty. I mean,
you guys are going to give other better Web3 based answers. So I'll say check out the Internet Archive. There was a decentralized web summit, especially the one in 2018, tackled a whole lot of Web3 issues and had some really fantastic keynotes. So I would start by going back to learn a little bit history before we move forward, by learning what has been tried, lest we repeat some mistakes of history.
I think that's a great place to start. I would say for me, I don't think Web3 is an especially useful concept. I think decentralization, you mentioned it, obviously it's important to all of us. I think if you really get decentralization and love it, then that's great, you can move on to more advanced concepts, but I think that that's a really important place to start, because at the end of the day, if Web3 isn't all about decentralization, then I don't want to be a part of it. From there, learn about blockchain, Bitcoin white paper, great place to start. And then I happen to think that the Koinos white paper is a great way to get caught up on the state of the art, but I'm biased.
Yeah, I think you're right. White papers are a great place to start. Podcasts are excellent.
Like
great,
Unchained.
Like Unchained for sure. But then also you need to go back to Web 2, like Twitter. Hate to say it, but like it's a wonderful place to stay up to date on current events and things that are going on.
Yeah, and I would also recommend Andreessen Horowitz has their A16Z Crypto Canon, where they list a bunch of resources, and Linda Shea, who is the co-founder and managing partner at Scalar Capital, her last name is spelled XIE. She does a lot of primers, and they're really, really well done for beginners. I'm also starting to write a few primers. They're on multiple places, many of them on Web 2 actually, like in a Facebook newsletter and on Medium, but you can find them all on my Twitter page, or I have a daily newsletter and I promote my articles there.
And
So.
we share insights on our website as well at CoinFund.
And there's the Web3 Foundation as well, although they're kind of more protocol specific, but they're a good place to learn as well.
Perfect. Chris, you brought this up slightly, and it's come up a few times in our discussions. Product Hunt, is all based around community, and this is what our people, our followers, our viewers right now want to know about. How important would you say is community to Web3 culture?
To me, community.
I think to the group, but we can start with you.
Community is everything. Everywhere you look, everything decentralized. Like I said earlier, being part of a community is very innate to what we want, what we need as humans, to be part of communities with shared values. When you look at the proliferation of DAOs, again, this is going to be, as they proliferate, it brings together like-minded people across the globe with a shared ideal potentially, or with a common goal. So to me, it's all about that community, but then it's also in a way representative democracy, because in many cases with the tokens, the governance tokens that we're able to issue going forward, you give those people a say into the direction of that community. So to me, to me, community defines Web3.
Yeah, there's a reason why pretty much all of crypto now hangs out in different chat groups, like on Discord and Telegram and stuff like that, because there's and frankly there's a reason also why crypto is so tribal, which is the fact that when you get all these people that are kind of financially incentivized in the same direction, then they become very religious and tribal about their coin and blockchain. Absolutely. And this is kind of translating over into the NFT world and the DeFi world, and just even about the different chains. Like I did a panel, and there was an artist on there, an NFT artist, and he was saying that he got a grant to do NFTs on Solana, which is a blockchain that does smart contracts, which means that it competes with Ethereum, and it's kind of like an up-and-coming blockchain. It's been on a tear this year, has just proved super popular. And he said that when he turned to his collectors and was like, oh, like, what would you like to see from me when I do my NFTs on Solana? They were like, we don't collect NFTs on Solana, we only collect them on Ethereum, which, so anyway, so it just, all I'm trying to say is like, community is everything, and it leads sometimes to tribalism.
Yeah.
Totally.
I would mention that a group of the plural of customers is not community. So I just made that up, so somebody tweet that.
That's good.
You're so tweetable.
Thank you, I try. But a Discord channel or whatever, great. It's great to have an ephemeral group of people who have a shared goal, and that community can come together and do its thing, and that's great. My dream for Web3 is like cyberpunk cottagecore. So that means that you have communities that more replicate our real world communities, where the groups that you're really close with are generally 7 to 20 people, and then you have touch points that expand that up to maybe 100 people. There's some like statistics about how that drops off, but that you can replicate like the utility and community and sense of safety of, say, a local book club, where you go and you're getting something done, you have a common goal, but it's not just value-based, and it might lead to sharing things or long-term friendships or not. But the idea on the internet of, like it gets better and being able to find people who are like you, that is what was so important in Web 2, reaching out of your tiny community where there's only one other weirdo and find some other weirdos and form together with them. So that is the kind of community that we need to get back to on the internet.
It's kind of a funny question if you think about it. We're humans, so we're all like human people. We congregate in communities. That's what makes us basically unique as a species. So the fact that we even have to like talk about it and bring it up and ask questions about it, I think says more about what had happened with society and how disconnected we'd become from one another and how absent community had come from our lives and how we're kind of, and maybe the role that the internet plays in that. I think American capitalism, for lack of a better term, contributed. I think the internet kind of accelerated it where now we're even more disconnected and we're just looking at screens. But I think people are hungry for going back to communities and finding ways to engage with one another. And I think where blockchains come into play is that they provide a mechanism that can enable these communities to incentivize one another to contribute value. But that's not the end all be all, which is the point that I think she's reiterated a number of times. And that's what attracted me to the Steem blockchain and Steemit originally was, hey, we're fusing community and blockchain and we're giving people a platform that enables them to connect with one another. And then we saw the impact that it has when you make everything about money and you just tokenize something because you can. And we thought, well, let's build communities and let's build these things called smart media tokens, which will allow anybody to create a community and have their own token. And yes, I think we were right that that was the direction that would have improved the situation. But to kind of your point before, that only would have, in my opinion, I don't know what they're doing over there now, that only would have created more communities all about money, arguing cult-like, going against one another, which I don't necessarily think is a great direction.
Fair enough. That last question was from Connor, by the way. Thank you, Connor. So next question comes from Brian Piper, and he asks, how do we think Web 3.0 might impact our educational system, especially higher ed?
Well, I would like to just take a quick sidebar to mention that the phrase Web 3.0 is a somewhat different phrase than Web 3 and refers to Tim Berners-Lee's implementation in 2007 of the semantic web. So I think that what we're Web 3ing now is like an all lowercase one. So look at some Google Analytics around that. That's a rabbit hole. But higher education, somebody else take that and then come back to me.
Well, higher education is in crisis. And it hasn't been very effective at doing what it says that it should do, which is educate people and prepare them to produce value in the community, in the population, whatever. I wouldn't be involved in blockchain if I didn't think it was going to be involved in reshaping every system that is stagnating or declining, which appears to be the vast majority of systems that we see. Federal government, local government, educational system, health system, financial system. You can't think of a system that isn't widely acknowledged to be perceived as stagnating or declining. Nobody's like, yeah, those things are going great. Right? So they're in trouble and we need to fix them. And how are we going to fix them? Not to just like sound like a broken record and reiterate everybody else's points, but more community focused, more real world, and using more modern incentivization technologies to help people coordinate more efficiently to produce more value. And I mean all of this in a non-strictly capitalist sense, because I know it can sound like I'm saying, oh, everything should be about making money and working at a company, and that's not what I mean. I mean, we do have to be we need to be building stuff and working together to make things better. That's what I mean by producing value. And we need to be doing it more efficiently than ever, more environmentally friendly than ever, and in a way that ensures that as much of the value, the wealth that comes from that value creation is distributed amongst the people who are participating in the system. And I think that's where blockchains can add just literally incalculable value.
It feels to me like, just like many other institutions, higher education is behind and it's not adapting quick enough. We do a lot of hiring. We're looking to hire the best computer scientists in the world. I don't think I've come across one that has taken a course in Solidity or Rust at a top university. I don't know if they're not out yet or what's going on, but like, I would love to see the university system move quicker to help get their hands around this technology and what's happening and help educate at an earlier age. But a lot of the stuff that I see is mostly self-taught. I don't know if you guys have a similar experience.
I think that the best thing, or for a while at least, the best thing that was coming out of the huge influx of funding into the blockchain space was interest in academic research and distributed systems theory and implementation and cryptography that has existed for 30 years, and those people were working in like basements, and now they are making insane salaries. So, if you would like to write a thesis about distributed systems or Web3, that would be how it can impact higher education for you.
Yeah, I have an opinion on this actually, which is based on the fact that I think decentralization will kind of change the way that people make money in the future and the way that kind of just like it's been gradually happening over time, but it's going to be accelerated now. Where, kind of that old model of like, joining a company and being there for decades and then retiring on the pension or whatever, like obviously that's been shifting because of movement toward, things like 401ks and whatever. But also, now we're at this moment where still people, okay, yeah, they switch jobs, but still they're moving from one full-time employer to another full-time employer, and they kind of go along that way. And I've actually spent most of my career freelance and working for myself. And I think in the future, because of decentralization and Web3, I think there is going to be a lot more people that are going to be making their money the way that I do, where they have like multiple income streams from different places. And I think they're going to be doing that by participating in these different crypto networks, and they're offering different services. Like maybe they're offering file storage, or maybe they're participating in the indexing or like video transcoding or whatever any of these other decentralized services are doing, and they're earning coins. And they're kind of like just freelancers, but more in this like digital way. And then on top of that, I think, I mean, how many people do you know that have some job, but really they have this like passion and it's creative, like they're a musician or they're an artist or, whatever it might be, but they don't actually really do that because they spend all their time at their full-time job, and then they have families and friends and whatever. And so they like just never like pick up their ukulele, or they never, paint on the weekends like they mean to, or whatever it might be. And so I think what's going to happen is like NFTs are going to enable a lot of creative people to be able to actually monetize their talents. And so I think we're just going to see like a lot of people just becoming more of their true selves and being able to earn money just from their like essence, basically like who they are. And it's going to be like more like personal expression. At least this is what I hope I would like love if this happened. Because I have so many friends that are, kind of in that bucket, right? Like they have something they love, but they don't do it very much. And, I feel like you were put on this planet to do that thing. And like, it's just like a shame to me that they're feeling this urge to make money the safe way and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, if you did that thing, you would definitely make money, but they need the time to make that success happen.
I don't know if like NFTs need to come out of the creation process of that, but like commissions are super important to small artists, and being able to commission things like in a Patreon or an OnlyFans sort of a way, where you're not dealing with credit card percentages and walled platform 30% cuts to your revenue, is a game changer for a smaller content creator. So that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, I mean sorry, and I just want to like explain why I brought all that up in relation to this question about higher education, which is just that I think in higher ed you're going to see probably this shift where it's not going to be about like career counseling services where they're trying to get you at one of the top 4 accounting firms, or like whatever it is. It's going to be more about like knowing what it is that you're interested in, and then like being more creative about how you might earn income from that. And so I think like that's going to be maybe what the impact is on higher education.
And connecting them with communities that can help them on their way, because nobody makes a career by themselves. You need a community to take you there.
Yeah.
So let me actually rewind back to our last question because we had a follow-up, which is really wonderful. Color Me With Sunshine on YouTube, love YouTube names, asked me, how do we find these communities and get involved with them? Do you have any recommendations? Where should they go looking?
Oh, God.
I mean, that depends what you want to do. If
Fair.
you like just want to find a community, like all roads lead somewhere. That's like Alice in Wonderland. Like if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Looking at like what you're interested in is probably the place to start. So like if you're really into like I want to check out art things, or I did actually see an NFT project I thought was pretty fun just for my own interest, like Crypto Coven looks really cool because you could just like buy witches and that sounds badass. So like look around at things that you think are interesting and that fall within the purview of your skill set. So if you're really into like I want to look at charts, I want to do like technical analysis, that's going to be a very different rabbit hole than if you're like, I want to understand how I'm able to do peer streaming like live in a censorship resistant way. Like they're very different.
Yeah, but like any
Like-
of those communities, like you will find they tend to have like a Discord or whatever.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
basically, if you
I was
get in
gonna
there,
I was going to say Discord as well.
yeah, like it used to be Slack and Telegram, but it's pretty much Discord now. And if you just get in there, you're just going to meet people, and then probably through conversation, you guys will have an idea, and then you'll be like, oh, let's work on this together, and and like then you're off, and like you're golden. I mean, that's you know.
It's amazing how NFTs have made this space accessible because people get it, and in a way, it's an easy way to identify a community as a very basic level. But then you start peeling back that onion, and you find the Discord, and then you're home.
Google area of interest and crypto or blockchain,
Right.
and then click the Discord link or the Telegram channel, but the Discord link.
Perfect. Let's talk NFTs just for a second. This is a question from Yusef Amar on YouTube. Thank you. He asks, what are the top cases that solve real problems that cannot be solved by centralized approaches or standards/protocols when it comes to NFTs?
Specifically NFTs.
I guess we'll start there, but if you have other thoughts in Web3 in general, I think maybe that's interesting. But he has asked specifically for NFTs.
Well, I mean, this one that we talked about with giving creators a direct relationship to their fans, because you know a lot of creators now are making a lot more money from selling their NFTs than they would have if they had gone the traditional model of releasing their creations, whatever it might be. Whether it's like, I mean, music is probably a great example. Like, I'm sure most people know that when musicians release music via Spotify, they make just a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of money off of that. Whereas, you know, I'm sure people are aware there are musicians now who have been selling their NFTs and they have been making a lot of money from doing that. So, you know, kind of basically when you cut out all those middlemen, then essentially the creators themselves can earn the profits. But on top of that, what also happens is that creators can kind of like basically monetize their super fans in a way that they couldn't before, because like, if you think about how like a lot of musicians were turning to touring because they weren't actually making money from releasing their albums, that would be, you know, kind of a better way for them to make money. And yet, essentially, like if anybody's tried to ever go to a concert, you know, they'd sell the tickets to scalpers who then make all the money, right? And then there are people who maybe maybe they sell the tickets for like $100, but then there are people that are willing to pay $1,000. But the creators don't get that money. But now through NFTs, you can have like different tiers of NFTs, and so you can actually make money from the fans that are willing to pay $1,000 for whatever it is that you're offering, as well as money from, you know, the people that are only willing to pay $100. And so you can capture kind of like all levels of the fan base, whereas like before, just with other models, that was more difficult.
And royalties, right? As those NFTs are sold in the future, which is really cool because you always get credit for the work that you've done from the beginning.
Yes.
I should also mention that I suspect that far more creators than people realize are in the hole on NFTs and have lost a lot of money on NFTs because they're not free to create. In fact, they can be quite expensive to create and transfer. And so, yes, a lot of people have managed to make money. To offer a contrary viewpoint, a lot of that money ultimately comes from whales who are inflating the prices to generate interest in their platform. And yay, creators are taking that opportunity to capture some of that money for themselves and fund their creative endeavors, and that's great. But a lot of creators are losing money creating NFTs because they think it's an easy way to make money, and it isn't yet. It would be great if you can create and transfer NFTs for free. Be great if somebody built that blockchain. But as of yet, it isn't. So I just wanted to bring up that point. It's not all sunshine and roses. I would also like to point out that if anybody doesn't know, it stands for Non-Fungible Tokens. So you can learn about non-fungible. I think like how many people are like NFTs? It's like, do you know what they stand for?
That's literally where I was going to start, because I'm not exactly sure. I feel like it's become an umbrella term for like digital media, and that is not really the same thing. So something that there is provably only one of has a specific set of use cases, generally around like a perceived sense of scarcity and value related to that. But some piece of media which is signed by a cryptographic fingerprint, of which there could be many, might be attached to a royalty system, or could be, just used to prove either provenance of ownership or something else, and that's a useful construct as well. But I think you're right. I have one friend who is a fine artist, has been around for a while, and one of her first big break shows, I think, was in 2010, and where she pre-sold the entire show on Kickstarter, and it was the first artist to have ever done that. This was Molly Crabapple's Shell Game. And that kind of like set a new business model paradigm for artists. So, but like again, looking at, can you do that with NFTs? The pre-sale funds of having to mint the NFTs were prohibitive compared to, say, showing in a gallery. Not everybody has access to the traditional gallery model, so like your experience may vary. But what I think is really cool is that we are again exploring the business models where there have been gaps for artists. Of course, as always, the concern is like, please let's not reduce art to market value. But it's cool that artists can eat. That's the most important use case.
I actually think NFTs have so much more potential value than people even realize right now, because they have so much more value beyond just like collectibles. And the way that I like to think about them is we have learned that these are an economic primitive, that there are these economic primitives that are incredibly valuable because they enable us to more efficiently collaborate to produce value. Fungible tokens, like currencies, are one clear economic primitive. Markets are another primitive, and these non-fungible tokens, which are just like a fungible token, except they have additional fields for more data. So you can customize them and you can add more information to these things and make them more unique, can add tremendous value. You said, I think you brought up tickets. Tickets are an NFT. They always were. NFTs, just like FTs, or cryptocurrencies, predated the blockchain. What the blockchain gave us was a trustworthy ledger with no centralized entity and control that can run these economic primitives in a peer-to-peer manner. And the potential use cases for those are literally infinite.
I totally agree with that. And you're seeing this interconnectedness, right? You have NFTs today, and you have DeFi. Well, the financialization of NFTs is only just getting started. And then you can take your NFT and you can drop it into a game and you can play it, right? So now you've got the gaming vertical, you've got the NFT vertical, you've got the DeFi vertical, you need infrastructure to run it. And so I think you're right. We're just at the very starting point.
And there may be more economic primitives. Honestly, I think on our team, that's what gets us the most excited. That's why we work on a general purpose protocol, is because we're like, we want to explore this space and find those economic primitives. It's great we're finding NFTs now, automated market makers, we've discovered these. There is so much more to come, and that's where the value creation is going to appear. And that's why our mission is to lower those barriers, is to maximize that experimentation.
Very cool. So final question before we do wrap-ups. I'm going to steal this straight from Laura. What is your prediction for Web3 in the next 5 years?
Somebody else go first.
Oh my gosh. Next 5 years.
Crystal ball.
I'll go. I will bet you will have $1 trillion in assets under management for DAOs.
Wait, DAO's plural or one DAO?
DAOs plural. I think they're going to proliferate. Like I said earlier, I think there's like 15 billion maybe today. I'll bet you it goes to 1 trillion.
Because on my show recently, Anatoly Yakovenko, who's one of the co-founders of Solana Labs, which created Solana, he said that he thinks there will be oh shoot.
He said like 100 million users or
Oh wait, now okay. I was about to say that I thought he said he expected to see a $1 trillion DAO on Solana.
Oh really?
But now I'm questioning what the number was, because you guys, I have not slept much in the last couple of days. So check out the show and you'll find out what the number was there.
I mean, in 5 years, I hope to see everybody in America, maybe the world, America is my area of expertise as an American, using at least one application that is somehow powered by a blockchain. That seems achievable, and I think that would be great. And that's what I want to see happen. I don't know much about projections of monetary value.
I think we're being conservative.
Oh, I mean, great.
I think we're going to see a at least bifurcation, maybe 3 ways. I don't know. Split. What?
Trifurcation.
A trifurcation. Yeah, well, that's like a trilemma. Not really a thing, but we're going to make it a thing because we said so.
Right.
Words don't mean anything in this space. You
No.
can define them as you go.
Correct.
Between projects that come from people who say that they're disrupting themselves, and let's talk about the Metas of the world and the Twitter's decentralizing social media, et cetera, and the sheer market force behind launching those products and seeing what happens there. And then we'll see the continuance of what's happening right now with the kind of like grassroots, but really seriously fueled by a huge influx of venture capital money, which I believe may be intrinsically incompatible with creation of social good over time.
I'm sure the concern.
And a third category of like, oh shit, we needed to create an actual cyberpunk dystopian resistance, just like the games we've been playing for the last 30 years and the last books we've been reading. But like, we have the leather, like now we have the face masks. Now we're ready to actually mobilize, and we have the tools. And people starting to see that like the surveillance capitalism that was a problem previously is not being solved by adding these new technologies. There's a huge upsurge in the labor movement. There's the social changes in the gig economy and what's just Gen Z in general. I feel like the kids are all right, and I cannot wait to see what they are able to do with the picks and shovels that we are providing that has nothing to do with the stuff we talk about today.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you brought up Meta, because I think that's a really positive thing for the adoption of Web3. You've got 3 billion users every month on that platform, and now they know what is that? Oh, there's metaverse. There's actually something out there. So I do think it's opened a lot of people's eyes to what could be out there. And I'm not saying for a second that that's going to be the solution, but I do think it's going to accelerate adoption in other places.
I think a part of the problem that I have with the question itself, and it was funny, I was just talking with my dad about this on the way over here, is that I believe very firmly that the entire economy is undergoing a tectonic shift right now that is going to be highly, highly disruptive, and it actually makes forecasting what the next 5 years will look like incredibly difficult, and it can go very dystopian, as I think,
I always go dystopian.
I know you've raised the concern. Or maybe it's an opportunity, hopefully it's an opportunity to remake things in a more community-focused, more healthy and more environmentally healthy manner. But it's very much up in the air, and one thing that I'm very passionate about communicating is that the future doesn't happen all on its own. Good things don't just happen. It takes people working together to make those good things happen. Otherwise, bad people will work together and make the future what they want it to be.
Yeah, and I think for my prediction, it's kind of what I was saying earlier about how I feel like I'm already witnessing this, that like basically the way crypto people live, and this is like a kind of an interesting thing. I've just noticed all my sources, and maybe you guys will differ with me, but so many of them at least there's just really no separation between their personal and professional lives. It's like all crypto. Like crypto people are both the people they work with and also their friends. And it's just like, it's all one big thing. And I feel like what's going to happen more and more with crypto is that basically money is going to reflect more of our personalities, kind of like what I was saying before. Like, it'll allow you to create more if you're kind of a creator, or it will like, be this kind of, it's like your membership into your friends with they all own Bored Apes, or, they all own a noun, or, whatever it may be. And so I feel like we're just going to see more and more of like this melding of like who we are as individuals and kind of like our financial lives, which I know sounds really weird, but I think that's where this is going.
No, I agree, but I would almost flip it. And I would say that this is the way we were headed, and crypto is what has emerged out of that and is an attempt to make that work. We were moving towards mission-based organizations, working at companies that we believed in rather than these just massive monoliths that have been around forever. Yeah. And so, yes, I agree, but I would almost flip it where I think that this is where we want it to go. This comes out of the collapse of capitalism and the reformation of the community and kind of going back almost to our humanistic roots. And crypto is very much, and blockchain is very much an outgrowth of that shift. And so they play on each other. Yeah, absolutely.
See a collision between ESG, the ESG movement, and crypto coming together for purposes of good. I do see that as a theme as well.
Yeah, which is
people
interesting,
care.
actually.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's just funny because like ESG kind of, it sort of reminds you of like a boring corporate boardroom and regulators. And
Me too, yeah.
So it's just fascinating that actually now both of those, and crypto obviously is like the Wild West and it's crazy and da-da-da. So it's just funny that like they are converging.
Yeah, but come on, DAOs, governance. S, look at the way we're able to bank in certain cases, the unbanked. I can give you a million examples there. And then, everyone goes right to the E right away. Oh, Bitcoin, proof of work. Well, there's a lot of really interesting things going on we were talking about earlier in the carbon markets to make sure that, and I think there's a massive willingness within the community to address climate change. So I think it'll be an ongoing theme for 5 years, in the 5 years.
Perfect. So let's wrap up. Where can everybody find you? Talk about what you're working on very briefly and how they can get in touch if they want to. Chris, I'm gonna start with you. We'll work our way this way.
It's hit me on Twitter, which when I just recently joined crypto full time, and I was advised that my Twitter game is not that great because when I was in traditional finance, I couldn't use it. So PerkinsCR97 at Twitter.
Andrarchy on Twitter, ANDRAR. Well, I guess it's on there.
It's on the screen.
Okay. Yeah. And the thing I'm working on is the Koinos Blockchain, which is a feeless blockchain that is infinitely upgradable with universal language support, so developers can work in the programming languages they already know and love. You can learn more about that at koinos.io. That's coin with a K, os.io.
My Twitter handle is at Amber Balde, so just my full name that you see there. You can find Clover at clover.io and a beta of Clover code at clover.app. That's VS Code in the browser, deployed to a private VPS. It's kind of cool. The overarching mission, though, of what we're working on is distribution of the sorts of software that we're talking about today, but also literally any app or service that you could self-host. Those things are fundamental to re-decentralizing the web. So if you want to look for a real place to start and you're like super green to Web3, just look up what self-hosting is and maybe start from there. But ultimately, we want to help people and businesses use apps that treat them and their data better.
And you can find me at Laura Shin, as you see on the screen. My website is unchainedpodcast.com, and Unchained Podcast is on all the major podcasting platforms. We're also on YouTube. And you can pre-order my book right now. As I said, it comes out February 22nd. And the URL to do that is bit.ly, which is bit.ly/Cryptopians. CRYPTOPIANS. And you definitely also can listen to my show, which comes out twice a week, Tuesday and Friday.
Perfect. And I am Alex Shibar. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you learned, enjoyed, were entertained. 3 quick things to kind of end this thing up. Number 1, our next big event will be in January. It is our Golden Kitties event. This is our annual award show celebrating the best in startup culture. If you've never checked out a Golden Kitties before, it is a lot of fun, so keep an eye out for that. Number 2, if you want to host events in your city, we've recently launched an ambassadors program. One of the things Product Hunt was really well known for before pandemic was incredible local events. Community. It's all about community, as you've heard tonight. So if you would like to host some of these events, please sign up. You can find more on our Twitter right now at Product Hunt. And number 3, we want to know what you want to learn about next. There will be a survey coming out after this event in the next couple days. Please fill it out. We picked crypto, we picked Web3 based off your feedback. So if there's something you're really interested in, we can help. We can set this up. So again, thank you so much for being part of this. It's our first virtual event in a long time. We are thrilled to do it. We are excited for our next things. We will see you on Product Hunt. Thanks all.